This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
I hope 2024 never ends. We've got about a week left until the most important election of our lives, and the Democrat Media Alliance is desperate. This, right now, is the silly season of politics. Right now, the gatekeepers are failing, and today I'll explain exactly how that came to be. When Donald Trump scheduled a press conference in Howell in August, we were told this was wrong, because some racists had once met in Howell. Through guilt by association, the inference that Trump, too, was racist. And when Donald Trump scheduled a rally last weekend at the world's most famous venue, Madison Square Garden, we were told that was wrong, too, because there was a Hitler rally there once. In August, Democrats and the media relied on innuendo and inference to paint Trump as a racist. By October, with the polls showing a dead heat and others showing actually a Trump landslide, they were desperate enough to say all the quiet parts out loud. Trump is literally Hitler. To let the Democrat Media Alliance tell it, Trump can't speak in rural Michigan because that's too racist. It's an odd way to talk about a swing state and a place that Joe Biden himself spoke in 2021. But okay, sure, that's what you feel. Howell is irredeemably racist. Got it. But New York City, we've always been told, is different. New York City, we were told, is America's Mecca. It's proof positive that diversity is our strength. New York is a big, rich town, or at least it used to be. Madison Square Garden is big, and it's as big in New York and grandiose as it gets. But Trump isn't supposed to speak there because Hitler once did. Forget Hulk Hogan, forget The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, forget every politician from FDR to Trump. To buy the media storyline is to believe that Adolf Hitler is the only name that matters, and the only interest a native New Yorker could take in speaking at Madison Square Garden. Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, in all of her desperation, she invoked Hitler's name last week in an official press conference from the official residence, speaking off a 100% fictitious report in The Atlantic, which said that Trump once said he wanted generals like Hitler had. Here was Harris offering a warning about our democracy. That's how news channels covered it anyway. That the vice president is also running for president, that she's campaigning on public property, was seen as less important. Harris was treated as a neutral character in the drama, an officer of the court who is duty-bound to see something and say something. Well, here's what she said. So yesterday, we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. And it goes on and on. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Hitler, the man who was responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This week, Fox News aired a pretty interesting graphic. It showed that every Republican candidate for president in the last 60 years has been painted as Hitler or a fascist or both. Fascist is basically shorthand for Hitler. Ask the typical American what that word means, or even to give an example of one, and to the extent people can name one at all, it'll be Hitler. This started 60 years ago in 1964 with Barry Goldwater. Goldwater, you might remember, was victim of the most vicious campaign ad of all time, the Daisy ad. The Daisy ad showed a little girl in a field, little white girl, cute girl, playing. But then her and the world she lives in are vanquished by nuclear war. This was all text, no subtext. A vote for Barry Goldwater is a vote for your extinction, and Daisy's too. Even when JFK was alive, he always doubted whether Republicans would actually run Goldwater in 1964, because he thought it would be so easy to paint him as extreme. The only presidential race Lyndon Johnson ever won came the year after Kennedy was killed. As Larry Elder found, the year Goldwater was nominated, California's governor at the time, a man named Pat Brown, said the stench of fascism is in the air. So this was 1964. This was less than 20 years since Hitler marched across Europe. By virtue of offering Republican voters a choice and not an echo of liberalism that they'd known in the White House since the early 1930s, Barry Goldwater became baby Hitler. The pattern has held ever since. Barry Goldwater was Hitler. Richard Nixon, the first Republican to win the presidency in more than a decade, was Hitler. Gerald Ford, who pardoned Nixon, was Hitler. Ronald Reagan was Hitler because he won twice. George H.W. Bush was Hitler. In 1996, Bob Dole actually got a special dispensation because Bob Dole was a World War II veteran. It was tough to paint the guy who'd fought literal Hitler as Hitler, so the Democrats took the cycle off that one. But 2000, 2004, George W. Bush, Hitler. John McCain was Hitler in 2008. Mitt Romney in 2012 was Hitler with binders full of women. For the last 3 cycles, it's been Donald Trump, and he's been Hitler every time. It's been 12 years of Hitler for Trump, and for Republicans, it's been 60 years of Hitler. To put that number, 60 years, into perspective, both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are 60 this year. That means from the moment they were born until right now, the message from the Democrat Media Alliance has always been the same. A, this is the most important election of our lives. B, because we're running against literally Hitler. We can hardly expect that they would think outside this box when it's all they've ever known. And look, 1964 worked. Democrats have won a lot of elections. Why would you go away from what works? You go away from it because to invoke Hitler's name without Hitler stuff happening afterward is to strain believability. Eventually, people are going to say, where's all the Hitler stuff? And in the case of Donald Trump, you had 4 years of the guy in office. You would think that there'd be movements toward that kind of thing if Donald Trump were going to do it. Why would he wait? We saw how just over the last 4 years from Joe Biden, just how much a president can ruin in a 4-year time span. So beware the guys. Why TSA pats down the guy who takes a one-way flight? Because that guy has a lot less to lose. So you can ruin a lot of stuff in 4 years. I struggle with the idea that Hitler would wait until a second term to become a bad guy. So for 60 years, the entire time Kamala Harris has been alive, everybody who stood in the path of a Democrat, everybody who stood between a Democrat and the White House has been literally Hitler. Why Democrats say this, why they've used the same name for 60 years, and why a country of 300 million people only has one face of evil, all trace back to the same place. Democrats could not be this foolish without the help of the media, and the public wouldn't be stupid enough to buy any of this without the help of our school system. It's common knowledge that the news we read is written for people of the 6th to 8th grade level. It's also commonly misunderstood what that means. One book in my collection, I for years have collected how-to books on journalism. I find it valuable to study in the 2020s or in the 2010s when I started, what were people doing in the 1910s? What were people doing before, phones were widely available, before everyone would have had a car? Like, how the information, how was it gathered? How was it delivered from point A to point B? And what I found in that study is that humans are humans. People are people. It's really just the technology that's changed. And even versions of what we have texting today, you can read a book from the 1910s where a guy's talking about sending telegraphs between himself and his editor. And it looks like a text exchange between an editor and a reporter in the field. So one of these journalism how-to books in my collection, it took on this 8th grade theory head on to pour cold water on it. It said, well, who exactly are all these 8th graders we're writing for? That book was published long before Twitter. But with Twitter, all it takes is the briefest of scrolls to see that those 8th graders we're writing for are everywhere around us. As my friend Tiffany Justice said in episode 26, Dumb by Design, in early education, kids learn to read. But from 3rd grade on, they have to be able to read to learn. Michigan's test scores for kids in the 3rd to 8th grade don't paint a pretty picture. You could blame COVID, and to an extent that's true, but you should also blame the move away from phonics as a teaching tool for reading. And you can blame school funding, and schools have for a century, but you should also blame school systems that graduate high schoolers who haven't read a full book by the time they get to an Ivy League college. Schools love to underperform and then, when they're challenged for it, claim they need more money. A version of this existed in 1924. They'll be doing it in 2124. This is what they do. But our kids in 2024 have never struggled more with the very basics of the good life: reading, writing, arithmetic. And our schools have never been less interested in teaching them. Those 3 R's, the fundamentals that I was taught, have been replaced by social and emotional learning. A math teacher nowadays is more likely to ask for your daughter's pronouns than the English teacher is to show her how to use them. It's like everybody in schooling got bored with their jobs and decided to do something else. The teachers want to be counselors. The counselors want to be principals. The principals want to be superintendents. Nobody wants to do the job they're hired for. And as a result, your kid's not getting an education. They're getting a re-education. A kid who can't help their dad calculate the tip at dinner knows 6 different ways to call dad racist for the joke he just told. Your kids aren't being trained into becoming independent, functioning adults. They're being groomed to be automatons who act on orders, who hold protest signs, who raise the fist and repeat whatever the slogan is of the day. So whether the cause that day is queers, steers, or Palestine, the instructions are the exact same. This is the real grooming that goes on at schools. It's meant to turn your kid into a political animal with an empty head. And this is the big lie of intersectionalism, that a good life can be built about caring about everyone else's causes on earth except your own. That to bring losers of many stripes together under banner could ever produce something other than losing. Our public schools are a living and breathing reminder that we are the company we keep. Pop quiz. Public school grads, I'm one, you probably are one, most of us went to our schools here in Michigan. Pop quiz. If you had to say that someone was bad and you couldn't use Adolf Hitler to compare them to, who would you say? If I was asking this question in 1932, before Hitler took power, who would you have said? Think about it. Tweet me. I'm on Twitter, down I-75. I'd love to hear what names you come up with. What name would you have used in 1930 for shorthand for evil? Napoleon? Alexander the Great? Genghis Khan? Joseph Stalin? The devil himself? If I had to guess, most of you struggled to come up with 3 other names that are bad guys, just not Hitler. 5 would be a real struggle. I had to include the devil in my list. 10 would be almost impossible. I have a smart audience, and yet these names don't come tripping off the tongue. And that's where public schools have left us. Of the billions of bad men who've ever walked this earth, somehow only one, Hitler, today in 2024, is our shorthand for evil. Our schools and our media have left us a populace that cannot and does not, refuses to, in fact, read beyond headlines. The news we read is written for the very dumbest among us. The type who think that Madison Square Garden somehow became the most famous venue on earth, but has only held 2 events in its history: a Hitler rally in 1939 and a Trump rally in 2024. Forget the New York Knicks, forget the Islanders, forget WWE, forget Drake and Kendrick Lamar and Tupac. In our dumb and drugged up country, Trump and Hitler are the only things that have ever happened at Madison Square Garden. In August, I wrote that the gatekeepers are failing, noting the less than stellar rollout of Kamala Harris, who spent her first month hiding from the media. I wrote, all the Yas Queen's horses and all the Yas Queen's men can't put the Kamala Harris candidacy back together again. The gatekeepers are failing. They will mount one last stand, and they might even win. But right now they're losing, and they know it. In the time since, we've seen a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We saw the media join Harris against Trump in a 3-on-1 debate on national TV, whose intent was the same as the assassin's bullet: remove Donald Trump from the body politic. None of it worked. Normally, when a guy's been a victim of 2 assassination attempts, there'd be calls from all quarters to tune down and turn down the rhetoric for the good of the country. And it was a nice thought 3 months ago, lasted perhaps a half day. But right now the times are too desperate and the polls too close for all that. 1 week from the most important election of our lives, And Kamala Harris's argument is that Donald Trump is literally Hitler. After the lawfare didn't work and the assassination attempts didn't take hold, many conservatives asked themselves, what the hell could they do next? If the assassination attempt was Plan Y, exactly what is Plan Z? Well, Plan Z is Plan A, B, and C that they've been running since the 60s. Plan Z is Plan A. Trump is literally Hitler. Ask yourself this question. If Trump is not literally Hitler, if he's merely some guy we don't like, if he's merely the guy who stands between us and power, if he's merely a guy who sends some mean tweets, where does that leave the Democrats? What's their alternate argument? What's Plan B if you take Hitler off the table? Now, keep in mind, these are the same people who said Mitt Romney was Hitler and John McCain was Hitler. Since the day they've lost, Romney and McCain became the exact type of Republican that Democrats love. Losers who took pride in losing. After 60 years of calling every Republican literally Hitler, Democrats swear they really mean it this time. But who's listening? And who believes them? And more importantly, who's scared of them? 12 years ago, Joe Biden told a group of black voters that Mitt Romney would put them back in chains. A crude reference to slavery. Mitt Romney's career in politics died that very day. We didn't learn it until years later. That remark made Romney fearful of the punch that might be thrown next. Romney did not know what I'm about to tell you. That any time you step outside the Democrat tent, you will be attacked. You'll be called a sexist, a racist, a white supremacist, anti-trans. I was just on the pulse with Roop Raj a few weeks ago with my brother Coleman Young, a Detroit City Councilman. I think in the space of about the first 30 seconds of him speaking, he called me all three of those things at once. So Democrats empty the clip on everyone they go against every time they go against them. And often it goes the way it did when Coleman Young tried it. Sometimes when you say everything, you've said nothing. And so when you look at 60 years of everyone who runs against us as Hitler, when you look at assassination attempts, when you look at just the desperation, the rollouts of the celebrities, the lectures that black men and black people aren't doing enough to drag Debbie Harris across the finish line, what you see is that Democrats are desperate. They're just reaching into the whatever little meager bag they're carrying and throwing whatever rock at you that they can find. This has been their standard operating procedure for 60 years. It should hardly shock you. In the time since Romney was called the guy who wants to put you back in chains, he's become a Republican in name only. It would actually be more honest to himself and the people he serves in Utah if he did his remaining time in office as what he is, a Democrat. In 2020, Romney wore a mask and marched with Black Lives Matter. This was nearly a decade since Biden's change remark, and yet here Romney was, mask on a knee, still trying to shake that racism level. This is a cucked mentality. As a senator, Romney voted yes when Biden had a Supreme Court nominee. So in what world does Biden call Romney a racist, and then Romney takes up residency as a puppet in Joe Biden's pocket? In what world? You're too prideful to let that happen. I'm too prideful to let that happen. But Mitt Romney was just fine with it. He'll march with you. He'll vote for your nominees. He'll vote to impeach a president of his own party, all because he cares about his image of kindness. If Mitt Romney had the character he claimed to have in 2012, he wouldn't worry about his reputation among men. He would know, and he would know that God knows who he really is. He wouldn't feel the need to say it with his chest out. He wouldn't feel the need to march the streets. He would know that God has him in his hands. Instead, Mitt Romney showed initiative. He decided to go it on his own. He decided he was going to redeem his reputation. He was going to kneel with the blacks, and he was going to vote with the Democrats. This is what they want a Republican to be. For 9 years now, Democrats have put Trump to the test, waiting for him to bend the knee the same way Romney did. Think about that Access Hollywood video. That would have ended most people's careers right there on the spot. Trump just kept rolling on. The Me Too movement ended the careers of men a lot more meek and mild and less visible and less rich and less brash than Donald Trump. Why did he survive? Because he fought back. And that's that fighting spirit that got him all the way into the Oval Office and might return him there. One hopes in the last days of the race that the Democrats will die with dignity as reality sets in. One hopes they'll embrace the peaceful transfer of power that America is known for. Instead, the streets in D.C. are being prepped for violence. Wonder who they're worried about. In a sense, in 2024, the Democrats are a victim of their own success. Many decades prior, Abraham Lincoln described the plight of the 2024 Democrats. You can fool some of the people all of the time. You can fool all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. What is Donald Trump if he's not literally Hitler? Possibly the 47th president of the United States.